The Venetian Renaissance painter Titian's remarkable series of 6 Poesie paintings took him more than a decade to complete. Take a bit of time with each painting, and it's no wonder they took so long. Painted on commission for Philip II of Spain, they're among the greatest works of art in all history, and if you bear with me, I'll show you precisely why they're so very special. The first clue is Titian's word poesie itself. He called them his 6 Poesie paintings, or poem paintings. Why? First, each painting represents a scene from Ovid's poem Metamorphosis. The word metamorphosis, meaning change or transformation, is key to the paintings, because each painting plunges us into a decisive moment when the events portrayed triggers some monumental and permanent change in the lives of their subjects. I think of Yeats's line, "All's changed utterly. A terrible beauty is born." And indeed, we are watching a birthing, even if in some of the paintings it is a birthing into tragedy and loss. First we have Danae at the very moment she is impregnated by Zeus, who flows upon her and into her with a shower of gold. And from this conception comes the birth of Perseus. And it is such a gorgeous painting, even in terms of color and form, the greens and washed out cobalt blues and the orangish burgundy of her bed curtains. And no one painted flesh with the subtle accuracy and dimensionality of Titian. With soft curves everywhere and a range of flesh tones, Danae is anything but idealized. So even as a goddess, she is so exquisitely human. And Titian draws the viewer in so very close to Danae. We are not only in the private space of her bedchamber, but with the thick, gorgeous red bed curtain drawn aside, we are visually at the very threshold of her curtained bed itself, the most private space of all. And Danae's body is in such a natural, unposed position as if we had stumbled upon her in an instant. And so we have. We are beholding her in the most private moment, naked and open to Zeus's shower. She is in a world of her own. The contrasting figure of her maid simply accentuates Danae's youth and paleness and eroticism and exposure. In formal terms, the painting so deliberately lacks finish and detail, enabling the viewer to enter wholly into the emotional and dramatic truth of the scene, rather than be distracted by superfluous details. It's an important point. Titian was capable of extraordinary detail and finish when it suited his artistic purpose, as in the portrait of Flora. But the relative abstraction here, the broad, empty swatches of color, leaves space for the viewer to participate in the dreamy bedchamber world of the painting, responding to it with our unconscious and creative as well as conscious mind. It is like a poem using minimalism or deliberate ambiguity as a tool, and the lack of superfluous detail plunges us wholly into that lush, dreamy minimalism that distills all into the pathos of Danae's impregnation from Zeus's golden shower. It almost becomes a dream landscape, which is how all myth operates. Some people consider this the most erotic painting ever, and why not? The mind forgets Zeus utterly and the narrative framing and simply feels Danae's flooding as she lies gorgeous on her disheveled bed, and so the erotic side of the painting simply throbs on endlessly beyond all words. Then we come to Andromeda, chained to a rock and about to be devoured by a sea monster. She is saved just in time by the now-grown Perseus, whose very conception we watched in the prior painting of his mother, Danae. Perseus, after releasing Andromeda from bondage, and look at those chains, will, quite happily for both of them, take Andromeda as his wife, and so this painting captures a decisive moment, yet streams into a future already present in the painting. Then there is Venus, the goddess of love herself, with her beloved Adonis, with whom she is so smitten she has cast out all her other loves. Adonis is her paradise and the home of her heart on earth. But Adonis is young and loves to hunt, and we see him here at the very moment he pulls away to leave Venus for the pleasures of the hunt. Ovid never portrays this scene of Adonis pulling away in the poem, but it is so very human and really embodies the very heart of the poem. It is a visual poesie. Everything from the wine pitcher they've knocked over in their morning dalliance to her gorgeous nakedness and gestures hint, and the wild frolicking of the past hours. And yet, here she is, holding on to her Adonis as he pulls away from her to leave for his hunt. It's such a human drama. I love you. I love you. Stay with me. Stay with me. Don't go, Adonis, for the woods are dangerous and the wild boars have sharp fangs. But Adonis is determined, and so leaves for the hunt. Titian captures, in their gorgeous expressions, the very moment of Adonis ripping himself from her embrace. And there, in her fear upon her face, and in what looks like a bandaged wound on his arm, is prefigured the gory doom about to befell Adonis, and the reasons for her fear. And what of the spilled wine pitcher that tells of the wet and wild abandon of their morning intimacy? Zoom in close and you see what the unconscious already knows. The pitcher is nested visually in a sea of bloody reds, foreshadowing Adonis's imminent bloody death. And the sun streams down supernaturally on the spot, not of future lovemaking, but rather on what in just minutes will be the literally gory scene from which Adonis will die, gored and torn apart by the very boars Venus had warned him about. I think as a goddess, she already knows. Please don't go, I'm worried. Come back to bed. It's so heartbreakingly human. And this decisive moment of parting contains earlier bliss and imminent loss. The gorgeous sensuality of Venus with her writhing nakedness, and Titian so good at a kind of fleshy dimensionality, the fine, muscled body of Adonis, too quickly dressed and ready to depart, the wine pitcher of both ecstasy and doom, prefiguring Adonis's bloody and literally gory death. Poesie, indeed. And we are not done with hunters being torn apart by animals, and this one is heartbreakingly, literally the slaughter of an innocent. Goddess Diana and the young hunter Actaeon, Ovid writes, deep in the woods of a lush green valley of pine and pointed cypress, huntress Diana, chaste and fair, when wearied by exciting sport, loved to bathe with her nymphs in the cool, secluded grotto retreat where no intruders ever violated the sanctity and pleasure of their bathing. Goddess of the hunt and of the watery moon, chaste Diana never felt more at peace than when her naked flesh and that of her nymphs was laved by the crystal clear waters gurgling up from the subterranean depths. Imagine Diana's shock when, on instant, her calm was shattered by the wide-eyed hunter Actaeon and his hounds, who had purely by accident stumbled upon the secluded grotto. Indignantly, since no spear was at hand, Diana splashed water on Actaeon and added the goddess's wish, after glancing at his hounds, that he might be transformed into a stag. Knowing in the instant, with his gazing upon the exposed Diana, that he had unwittingly violated a sacred law, Actaeon turned away, first shielding his eyes and then fleeing the lovely scene. Of course, his dogs followed, but confused by their master as he metamorphosized into a stag, followed their nature and turned upon the deer, ripping flesh from flesh and flesh from bone, till even Actaeon's moans were silenced. And what a magnificent and tragic world Titian creates with this hint. The hunter Actaeon, strong and powerful and quite beautiful, is represented at the very moment of stumbling upon the goddess Diana's grotto, with her and her nymphs naked and exposed, and recognizing his mistake, he drops his bow, raises his arms as if to ward off the terrible calamity about to fall upon him. His left hand, as if pushing off fate itself, is pressed toward Titian's lovely sky, which hints at an infinitude that foregrounds the futility of Actaeon's gesture. It is the decisive moment once again when all changes utterly. You can't undo it and cannot push it away. Next to him, one of his trained and loyal hounds, powerful and focused and part of Actaeon's ineluctable fate. And what of the nymphs, their faces, their stories? This painting is such an astonishing world of gazing. Each person in the painting experiences the scene differently, and focusing on each one at a time. It is as if the gestalt of the painting shifts to mirror each one's individual world. One looks towards Diana, aware of the terrible consequences of Actaeon's innocent mistake. One looks rather coyly forward, the muscular and lovely Actaeon, utterly unaware of the true nature of what has just happened. What she sees is a handsome young man arrived upon the scene of their bathing. And one of the nymphs looks out with an expression of fierce protectiveness as she covers up her goddess. But the most aware of all is the woman looking from behind the pillar. Her face registers such a tragic and full realization of not only what has happened, but what it means. She sees Actaeon in all his strength and youth and beauty and innocence. She sees the terrible fate about to be unleashed over Actaeon's unwitting transgression. She sees her chaste goddess feeling violated and indignant over the intrusion. I'm fascinated by her. She's tragic realization and consciousness itself there in the middle of the painting, the infinite sky behind her, and upon the thick stone arch of the grotto, the skeleton head of a stag. It's all there. She sees the truth of the moment and the unfolding truth of the moment's consequences. She is the sensibility of tragedy itself, but she's also tender and lovely as she holds the cool, mossy stone with the dead stag skull looming above her. And there is the terrible, indignant stare of the goddess Diana. She had, after all, chosen this secluded grotto to meet her needs and the needs of her entourage. This is their place of peace and of bathing and of calm and of regeneration. And there that young man rips apart the calm with no bow or spear at hand. Her stare will have to do, and her goddess wish or whim to turn into a stag, which, since she is a goddess, is so inviolate as fate. That lovely, trained, and loyal hound follows nature, the nature of earth and sky and biology and training, and as Actaeon flees the scene in horror, he metamorphosizes into a stag, and then, in this poem about the change and transformation of the hounds, his trained and lovely hounds change too. Suddenly, without their master, they do as they are trained and attack the stag unwittingly, tearing Actaeon to pieces. It is so very sad and unjust, and yet plays fairly with fate, for Diana is nothing if not chaste. It might as well be Actaeon's skull there upon the pillar. And so the painting becomes a meditation on power and fate and desire and accidental folly and the terrible consequences of unintentional errors, the infinitudes of Titian's blue sky, the beauty of the nymphs, and the warm curves of inviting flesh. Diana the chaste. We as viewers are more guilty of the crime of looking at what is forbidden to be looked at than is Actaeon. The skull on the pillar seems in constant moaning contrast with the warm curves of the nymphs. Amidst this maelstrom, a nymph still unaware tenderly dries her goddess's foot. It is such a loving and gentle and caring action done as the horses of disaster plunge ever onward, even into our own lives. This next painting is among my favorite paintings in all the world. It is Titian's Diana again, but this time with Callisto, and it is almost unbearably moving. The nymph Callisto deeply loved the goddess Diana, with whom she frolicked and hunted and served as one of her entourage. Chaste Diana's one absolute rule among her nymphs was to preserve their chastity, and so Diana and her nymphs all flourished in their chaste world apart from men. And that's what Ovid writes. He continues, "One sad day, though Jupiter, as he so often did, cunningly assumed the disguise of Diana herself, and so gaining access to her, came to Callisto and had his way with her unbidden. How utterly confusing to Callisto, and unmaking of her trust and unmaking of her world. And that wound was so shocking and alien to Callisto's world and nature, she bore it in silence, as if silence would make it go away. But soon her belly began to grow with a swelling new life inside of her. Of course, she tried to hide it from her fellow nymphs and from Diana, who she loved above all. But one day Diana and her nymphs arrived at their favorite grotto with the spring-fed brook for bathing. As Callisto turned away instead of disrobing, her fellow nymphs instantly sensed her pregnancy and turned cruel, undressing her by force as her goddess looked on with dismay and rage, and indignantly banished her from both grotto and membership in her entourage, and Callisto's world comes crashing down a second time. With faces and gestures, Titian tells the tale, the infinite sorrow of Callisto as she is banished for her suffering a crime. The second time her world is unmade, the nymphs taking pleasure in exposing her, the calm hand of goddess Diana, as if that of God, expelling her from Eden. It is so terribly, so utterly heartbreaking. This might be the saddest expulsion, exile, dispossession painting of all, or at least it rivals Masaccio's grief, unhinged exile of Adam and Eve from paradise. Callisto's arms spread almost like a Christ figure at crucifixion, and her face of endless grief as her world is again unmade. It is her second violation, her punishment for being a victim of Jupiter's indifferent lust. And there is such a mobile, kinetic sense of the four nymphs as she is exposed. Callisto's grief is convulsive and heaving. And look at her belly. It is rendered so abstractly by Titian, who is capable of such finish and detail, with its broad swatches of the whitest paint in the picture. Her belly button is like a wound, drawing the eye into it, making her belly both the visual and emotional center of the painting. The setting sky almost on fire, the blue Dolomite mountains pushing upward, the amazing figure in the exact center of the painting kneeling down as she looks up at Diana, her face registering all the sorrow and pity and love forsaken quality of the scene. I hope you enjoyed this brief tour of Titian's Poesie paintings. If you enjoyed this, please like and subscribe. It makes a difference.